Cyberpunk 2077 is a massive game, filled with goodies across every sci-fi fan's wildest imagination, but breaking into the game can be an overloading experience. Also, while the game's tutorial does a great job of introducing you to a lot of the concepts of the game, there are still some quality of life things that you might have missed that the game doesn't quite point out. In this video today, I'm going to quickly go over 8 big tips for anyone starting out in Night City on their first playthrough of Cyberpunk 2077. If this is your first time on the channel, the way I like to do things is by front-loading the information to see if you'd like to stick around for the video. I don't want to waste your time. So, in the description and the timeline, you'll see the chapters about which subjects I'll be going over. Feel free to jump ahead to anything that helps out, but we'll be starting in on some system specs to squeeze some more FPS out of your game. So let's get started on 8 tips for beginners in Cyberpunk 2077. Our first tip is going to be about optimizing your frames per second, and I think that this one is the one that applies probably to most people playing this game on PC. So we're just going to start right here in the basic section. We're going to turn film grain off, which I don't understand why is a thing anymore anyway. Chromatic aberration off, and depth of field. Then you want to take your motion blur and just jack that all the way to off. Those alone should give you a 10 to 15 frames per second bump. You can turn off lens flare. I personally enjoy it, so I've kept it on. It's like playing a J.J. Abrams movie all the way through. And then when we move down here, there are some other big ones that really help out. Cascaded shadows, range, and resolution. Turning this to all the way to low, if not medium, is going to be just fine. I've jacked this up to high and to low, and the difference is just negligible. Now, another big one here is the volumetric fog resolution. For me, by default, this was on ultra. I've turned it down to medium, and I am on a GTX 3080. So you can see that is still having a huge effect on the resource hog that it is. Another big one is screen space reflections quality. I'd say turning this one down is really going to help you out. I have it on Psycho because I just want to take advantage of the 3080's reflective stuff. The ray tracing thing here, a lot of these I've heard that the lighting can help out by turning this down if you have ray tracing. But honestly, using resolution scaling is probably going to save you if you have access to a 20 or a 30 series GPU. Putting it on quality will make the game's frames per second stabilize out for you and will make the game look a lot better. But if you're still having FPS issues, jack this all the way down to ultra performance and you'll gain a couple more frames per second. I've noticed that even on a 3080, if I turn off DLSS, it really hinders me. But hopefully this helps you out a little bit when it comes to tweaking your frames per second. If you have any questions about this, please by all means ask in the comment section and I'll do my best to help you out. This next tip is about the action wheel. So you know that if you want to stow your weapon, you double press Alt and the weapon goes down. And you can double press it again, it comes back up. But if you hold down Alt, you get the action wheel, which allows you to quickly cycle in between all of your different weapons, and you can stow your weapon as well as bring out your fists. Normally you press 4 to bring your fists out. But the nice one really is the both the tactical and the medical buttons here. You can quickly cycle through all of them by pressing Q and E, or depending on what you are, you're on console, to quickly get to a different quick item that will slot into the lower left corner. This really just makes it a lot easier than having to open your inventory, swapping these things out, and it makes it easier to switch to a specific weapon if you need to. So I wanted to really bring this one up because the game does not show you this unless you happen to stumble upon it or find it in these settings. Our next tip is about toggle buttons. So we know that pressing C allows us to crouch and go into sneak mode. But I don't know if you know this, but when you go to sprint, you don't have to hold down shift. You can just press it once and it's activated. But another really big one that's just going to save you a ton of time if you're playing on PC is that by pressing tab, you go into scan mode. You have to hold it down. Well, simply pressing caps lock allows you to go into scan mode and you don't have to hold a button down. It makes moving through the environment way easier, which lends itself to our next tip, which is always be scanning. We're going to go ahead and press caps lock here. So anytime you walk into a new area or go into a new room, just scan real quick. You'll be able to find out the rarity of items by looking around. As you can see over here, I can see that there we go, we have a legendary item. But it'll show me green, blue, purple for uncommon, for rare, for epic. So by doing this, you'll discover little tiny hidden, not necessarily Easter eggs, but stashes of items that you wouldn't have otherwise seen, because this is a relatively innocuous area. It's next to a little freeway over here. I mean, there's just nothing about this that would tell me, go over here, there's legendary boots. So make sure you scan a lot. I find that I spend majority of the game scanning like this before moving to a new area to do the same thing again. It's also important to find any kind of destructibles or things like that in the environment that can help you in any of your big engagements that you'll be getting to in the game. This next tip is about access points, and you'll be able to find these scattered throughout the map. And they're a pretty important portion of the game. So if you look right ahead, you can see that little red icon. You can also see it replicated on the mini map in the upper right hand corner. Now, access points aren't just simply terminals on a map all the time. I'm sorry, terminals on a wall all the time like you see here. Sometimes they're antennas, they're all sorts of different versions of access points. And these access points can be quickly accessed by pressing the caps lock button to bring up our scanner, and you can see your access point. It also shows us how much intelligence is required to hack that access point. These will scale up as you go through the game. Harder portions of the game, obviously you're going to require higher intelligence scores to hack into these access points or antenna, whatever it is. Now, you can also quickly discover these when you do the ping hack on an opponent or through a camera, whichever means that you want to go about that. When you ping it, it will discover everything on the network attached to that opponent or that object, and it's a quick way to find access points. And you can just simply find them by being in proximity to them. They'll appear on that mini map in the upper right hand corner, so do have your eyes out for that. But once you discover an access point, you're going to go over here, press F to connect to it. And our next tip is obviously going to be about hacking, but you're going to see these three rewards, I guess you could say. So completing an access point will grant you Euro dollars or eddies, components, and or quick hacks. And if you're able to complete multiple versions of these data mines, you'll actually acquire even more rewards. But hacking is a really huge portion of Cyberpunk 2077, and I'll be honest with you, I don't feel like the game gives you a really good primer on how to do this. In fact, it gives you a very easy hack to do initially. So hacking isn't just simply always going to be access points. It's going to be anytime you want to do the breach protocol with the ice pick demon. It's going to be maybe cracking the code on a piece of encrypted data. There are tons of times which you're going to jump into this screen, so it's important to understand how to do it. And once you understand, it's really easy to break. So the hack screen itself is broken up into 4 or 5 constituent parts. You've got the breach time remaining, you've got the code matrix itself, you've got the buffer, your sequences, and then your rewards. Now, working in reverse here, your rewards will either build, so if you try to get version 1 and version 3, you get both of the rewards, or they'll be mutually exclusive, meaning one's going to lock out the other. So for example, maybe you're trying to crack that milsec data chip, and you have the choice to either crack the code and decrypt it, or copy the daemon that is encrypting it. So you have 1 or 2 options, and one will cancel the other out. So always be mindful of your rewards before even jumping into the hack. Now, you then have your sequence required. So our objective is going to be data mine version 3. Let's hover over each one of these. And this is huge. This alone makes it so easy to do. You just plan it out from here at this point. E9, 1C, and BD. And then these are going to be inputted into this buffer up here. And basically the way the buffer works is, essentially, if you don't have the next sequence as an option, so let's say I just chose E9, and then the next option only presented itself as another E9, then I can select that one and it'll preserve my attempt at data mine version 3. If I were to say go E9, then let's just say BD, it would lock me out. I would fail this hack attempt. So basically, your buffer allows for you to either access more rewards or fix up anytime you accidentally mess up, if you possibly can. Now, then our code matrix. So the code matrix locks you into initially a horizontal or a row, and then a column. So for example, if I select 55 here, I then can only select from this row. And then if I select, let's just say 55 here, I then can only select from this row. By the way, I meant column and then row. So basically it's going to switch off between horizontal, vertical, horizontal, vertical. Whichever one you start off with will be the opposite of what it goes into ad infinitum. So basically what we're going to look at now is E9, 1C, BD. So E9 is right here. So it's going to lock us into this column. 1C is right here. It's going to lock us into this row, and that's BD. So we're going to E9, 1C, BD. And you can see that the other two failed. We didn't get the rewards for those. So we collected packets 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is going to be data mine version 3. Exit this interface. You'll see those rewards popping up on your left over there. Some Euro dollars, some quick hack components, all sorts of goodies. So this is how you navigate around hacking in the game, which can be kind of difficult and tedious, but hopefully that kind of broke it open a little bit for you. Now our next tip is a little bit more of a cautionary tale than a tip itself, but I'll take anything at this point. So looking at the technical ability attribute, then going into the skill crafting, we see all of our perks here, right? Well, don't choose Scrapper. As of this point in the game, Scrapper will automatically disassemble any junk item that you get. And you might actually get a junk item that is worth quite a bit of money. So hold on to it. You might accidentally disassemble something that you don't want to disassemble at all. And it really, really, really is going to be a bummer because you can't get that back in any way, shape, or form. And kind of a little bit of a side hint, hold on to any iconic weapons that you get, because these things evolve throughout the game and you can get some really good perks attached. Improvements or modifications attached to them. So really hold on to all of your iconic weapons, put them in your stash. It kind of goes hand in hand with the our discussion about the perk here. So I figured I'd give you a bit of a 2-for-1, but definitely avoid the Scrapper perk as of now until there's a patch that maybe says you can press a button that will automatically disassemble all your junk. So this way you don't disassemble a high priced junk item or something that you actually need. My 8th and final tip here is about damage types and resistances. You want to really pay attention to these. So I've brought up the scanner on this net runner right here, and you can see weak to there's 3 different symbols there, right? So those 3 different symbols are thermal, chemical, and electrical. And you want to pay attention to that because as you progress into the mid to late portions of the game, you're going to be dealing with that different type of damage. Let's bring up the inventory and we'll go to our weapons. And not all weapons are the same. So take a look at all of these assault rifles. Each one of them is a D5 copperhead. But the important thing to distinguish with all of them is by looking at the field right below where it says power bullets can ricochet off surfaces, you get the type of damage that this weapon does. Physical is the most common type of damage, but also the most commonly mitigated form of damage. But then after that, you also get thermal, chemical, and electrical. And each one will do more damage to certain types of creatures or certain types of armor. Take electrical, for example. That will do more damage to robots and mechanized suits. So this assault rifle, it does 13 to 16 electrical damage. So really what you want to take a look at is if you say organize this by DPS, I can see that, okay, this copperhead might do more damage than my equipped weapon, but I'm going to be doing electrical damage. And let's say someone is, I know from looking at a scan, they're weak to electrical damage. This will give me a leg up. So keeping a mind or at least an eye on the type of damage you're doing and the type of damage your enemies are not or they are resistant to is going to be very key as you push into the mid and late portions of Cyberpunk 2077. And at that, it brings our video to a close here. So hopefully this gave you a good idea on some quick tips to help you out in the game. I know they're not earth-shattering. They're nothing that's incredible about all these tips, but hopefully it kind of takes the edge off of learning this 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 hours into your playthrough. The action wheel is a good example of, I didn't find it out until I think a little bit into my first or second gig in Act 1. So it was just nice to kind of, I guess, push through that unnecessary learning curve, as it were, quote unquote. But if you have any other big tips that you would like to share with the community, please, by all means, put them in the comment section. I love to kind of create as much communication about information out there as possible. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. We have plenty more guides on the horizon, some lore videos, more streams, tons of stuff for Cyberpunk 2077 on the horizon. But as always, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one and take care.